Hi friends, welcome back to the 5th round of 2019 Animal Artists Collective videos. The aim of these videos and the art created is to provide a platform for emerging artists, to promote positive messages for animal welfare, and to connect artists to their communities. Artwork produced is always made available for sale, with at least 50% of the proceeds going to a non-profit animal conservation organisation. Unofficial participation is absolutely welcomed, videos, artwork alike, so if you create something based around the theme, make sure you share it with us on social media, and all of the links can be found in the description below for you. Make sure you check out all of the other artists participating this round. All their links can also be found below, and our guest artist this month is Kimberly Crick, so hello Kimberly. Make sure you check out her channel and video for this round, along with all of the other official participating artists. The theme for this round is Order Carnivora. This was tied with the last theme of ungulates when put to the vote on the Facebook page. So we didn't have a vote for this round's theme, as we wanted to kind of explore this one. And some of our unofficial participants actually chose to have Order Carnivora as their theme last round, as it was evenly tied. I initially thought that this theme pertained to all carnivores, but upon doing some research I found that it only included feline and canine forms, so this kind of narrowed down my choices a little bit, and I had a couple of options to go with. My first thought was a doll, as I recently photographed some at a local zoo, but when looking back at the references they weren't the best. They were a little bit unclear, so I decided not to go with that one. And I was also thinking, yes, perfect with this theme, I can draw another big cat, but I thought this would actually absolutely be too obvious for me, and I've also drawn the saber-toothed cat, which is obviously cat-like, so I didn't want to draw two kind of feline-like creatures for Animal Artists Collective pieces. Another of my options was the fossa, but ultimately the cute and fluffy Red Panda won, and I'm so pleased with my decision for this round. This one won over the fossa because I actually have my own, rather fantastic, if I do say so myself, references, and I really wanted to use them for this. So, let me divulge some Red Panda knowledge into you. That was a really weird way to say that, but never mind. So there are actually two subspecies of Red Panda. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the scientific Latin names because I will absolutely butcher them, but one can be found in Nepal, northeastern India, Bhutan, and parts of China, and the other can only be found in China around the kind of mountains in some kind of area. I'll pop it up as the subtitles because I can't pronounce that either, and northern Myanmar. I apologise so much for the pronunciation errors of anything I said there. This is new to me. I also have no clue which subspecies this is that I'm drawing. The Latin name is just Allurus fulgens, again, pronunciation not my forte, and nothing else is on the end, and so who knows what this subspecies is. So these are omnivorous mammals, and they can live up to 18 years in captivity and around 8 years in the wild. And the average length of a red panda is between 78 to 155 centimetres, and half of that length is actually made up of their tail. If you've ever seen a red panda either in the wild or in captivity, you'll know how cute and petite these guys are, and the tail is just so ridiculously, adorably fluffy, am I right? Red pandas mainly eat bamboo, but they also eat a wide range of flowers, leaves, fruits, tree bark, eggs, and even small animals and insects. And when you hear panda and bamboo, you'd think that it's kind of related immediately to the giant panda, but you'd think wrong. It actually belongs in a family of its own, and it's actually more closely related to things like weasels, badgers, skunks, and otters. The red panda is listed as endangered in the wild, and its main threats are actually caused by humans. The red panda was heavily hunted, being prized for its beautiful fur. They are still poached to this day, but not as heavily as they once were. And the biggest threat that red pandas face is actually loss of habitat caused by deforestation and habitat degradation. The red panda population has declined 50% in the last 20 years, and only around 2,500 remain in the wild. Many habitats are destroyed through deforestation for livestock herding. Herders cut down trees to maintain sheds and collect fuel wood from the forests. Livestock also graze and disturb the ground that was once home to bamboo, and bamboo does not easily re-establish in disturbed areas. And many of these herders are actually unaware of the consequences of their actions, and later on I'll talk about my chosen charity which helps to combat this by educating local communities. Okay. So, you have a little bit of information under your belts about these gorgeous creatures, so let's talk a little bit about the process of this piece. The photo reference, as I mentioned, was one of mine own, and it was actually taken at Wingham Wildlife Park in Kent, which is not too far from me. It's one of my favourite ones to visit. So I decided when doing this that I wanted to work in a little bit of a different method. Mainly because I wanted to use this piece as a tutorial, and I haven't done a tutorial for a long time using a solvent, and I'd been getting a lot of requests and kind of people asking about that kind of method of blending. My usual type of method of blending is using a white pencil, so this was going to be something a little bit different. So that's the kind of approach that I went with this. And I actually approached this piece in a completely different manner, as you've probably seen from the footage, that I actually started off with all of the dark parts. So I did all of the eyes, the nose and the dark areas around the mouth, and then I went in and started to fill in some of the colour. So I added the iris colours, starting from the lighter tones of yellow and moving all the way up through some burnt ochre and then some burnt sienna as well. And then I started to fill in the other areas of the red panda as well. So I started to fill in all of that orange fur on the face, the white patches on the face as well as that cute little pink tongue. That was one of my favourite areas to actually draw on this. So the whiskers for this guy, I actually used an embossing tool, and this is just a small tool that you can use to indent your paper, and any kind of colour pencil that you add over the top of these embossed lines kind of like doesn't fill in those grooves, so you're left with this really crisp white line. Now, as I was going to be blending with a solvent, this probably wasn't the best choice, because when you use a solvent and you have embossed lines, sometimes your solvent can actually bleed into those grooves and it kind of negates the fact of actually indenting your paper. But I'll explain a little bit later how I kind of combated this a little bit. But I just used some really light colours on the actual orange fur. I used ivory, cream, burnt ochre as I mentioned, burnt sienna. I actually used some Caput Mortem violet, some Indian red. So all of these really kind of nice warm tones to just flesh out the fur on this guy. And the very first layers of this were just shaded, so I didn't go in and add any kind of detail or anything on the very first layers. I only added the detail onto this guy when I had blended with the solvent. So I just added a nice base absolutely all over the red panda, so I filled in all of the dark areas, I filled in all of the face and ears, and then I went over and blended with the solvent, and for that I used the Zest-It pencil blend. By the way, all of the materials that I have used for this I've listed in the description, so you can go and check them out if you want to. And I just used a brush and just gently brushed this all over the portrait, and when it came to blending over those sort of whisker areas, I just kind of used the brush really softly and I worked in the direction that the whiskers were going, and I worked as gently and as efficiently as I could in between all of those little embossed lines that I'd previously made. Now, some bleeding did occur, and towards the end of this portrait you'll see how I kind of made those reappear. But once I had blended with my solvent, I let it dry for a full 24 hours just to make sure that everything was nice and ready to go for the next layers. And it's with those next layers, I first of all started off with using some shading, and then I went in and started to add the fur details. And I just used some really soft fur lines, just flicking the end of my pencil so you got this really nice tapered edge, and just really softly blending everything into one another. I used some glazing methods here and there, there as well. It's just using the pencil on the side and just really gently glazing a colour on top of other areas just to give a slightly different tone or effect. I used some of that around the mouth, around the eyes. I glazed some yellow and I glazed some red around there. But mainly just used that shading method and then just added in all of those fur lines just by using flicked lines. I think one of the benefits of using a solvent like this is that you don't have to add so many layers of coloured pencil, because you just add like those shading layers down first and then you blend with the solvent. And as you could see from the footage, when I did blend with that solvent, the colours became really vibrant. And also when you use a solvent, it's much easier to add layers down on top. So you might have added quite a few layers down before you went in with a solvent, and you kind of build up, especially if you're using like kind of a Prismacolor, you kind of build up like a waxy resist, like a wax bloom, and that can actually deter you from adding further layers. But when you use a solvent, that's kind of eliminated, kind of dissolves away, and all of the pigment kind of bleeds into the tooth of the paper, and it's like you're going over with your very first layers when you add coloured pencil back on top of a area blended with solvent. So it's really good at eliminating that wax bloom and kind of giving you almost indefinite layers, that layering ability. So that's pretty much all I did in terms of like technique for this piece. To add in the whiskers and the really white parts of the portrait towards the end, I actually used a jelly roll pen, and I just used that in the whiter areas just to extend and blend them into the orange areas, and I used that on the whiskers as well, along with a really sharp white pencil so that I could really get into those grooves and kind of lighten up the tones that kind of bled in there. But majority of the whiskers were actually lifted by using that jelly roll pen. It's not the best option in the world, but if you do happen to use a solvent on embossed lines, you can use something opaque and white like a white Posca pen, some gouache, or a jelly roll pen in my case here, to just really lift and brighten up your white areas. I also added a small touch of this jelly roll pen into the eyes as well for the highlights, and yeah, so it's just a really nice piece to work on. I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed the different working method, and I hope you guys have enjoyed seeing it as well. So the charity I'm donating to for this piece is the Red Panda Network. This charity run several great conservation campaigns, one being something called Forest Guardians, where they work closely with local communities to help preserve and support habitats and environments for the red pandas. These communities, they monitor and protect red panda habitats, and the Forest Guardians also work with local government agencies to combat poaching. And they regularly patrol habitats, removing traps, snares and other poaching devices, and report of any activity to officials. There are so many things that the Forest Guardians and the Red Panda Network do to protect these beautiful creatures, so make sure you go and check them out with the link in the description below. This piece is for sale and that link is also below, so if you fancy snapping up this little guy to display in your home, then follow that link and 50% of the proceeds will be going to the Red Panda Network. Make sure you give this video a big like to show your support for the AAC, and if you're new here, hit that subscribe button to receive weekly arty content like this straight to your sub feed. Happy drawing, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye!